It goes way back. There we go. Now we can kick it off. Okay, cool. So today I'm going to talk about merging the PLG, PLS, and sales lead funnel. So first, who am I? Very quickly, for those who don't know you, as I said, my name is G. I'm the co-founder and general partner at HyperGrowth Partners. More on that in a second. I was the VP of growth at Drift, Segment, and Gorgias. I'm an advisor on growth at Ramp, based in New York, on FinTech, on Reddit, which I'm sure you know of, in Workstream, HR space, and many other great companies. At HyperGrowth, we are a collective of VPs and CMOs who do advisory in exchange for equity. We have like over 30 people now, and more than 40 companies that we've helped over the past couple of years. And so that gives me a lot of experience, a lot of like knowledge of what works and what doesn't. And we're seeing a lot of companies that are thinking through the PLG, product-led growth, the PLS, product-led sales, and the sales-led. And so, have a couple of like thoughts, maybe some of them contrarian. If those, if you raise these questions, put them in the chat. So with that, let's go. So as marketers, we usually only think of the CAC. We think of CAC and the acquisition volume. But I think when you think of, acquiring customers, restricting yourself to the CAC is a mistake. There are additional costs to consider, and those will frame the motions and the channels that are open to you, right? CAC does force you into specific channels, but there's more costs than just the CAC. Actually, we're going to talk about how the entire transaction costs are split. And there's going to be a lot of food analogies in today's keynote, so I hope you aren't hungry already. If you are, I'm sorry about that. There's going to be pizzas all over here. So transaction costs. So first, a little story here. I've been buying a lot of SaaS tools for the past 2 decades now. Some years, I bought more than $1 million worth of SaaS. And I've been selling SaaS too. And, luckily for me, more than I bought, right? And recently, I've been working with a large social media platform that went public, if you can see the reference to my prior slides. And, I've been helping them build acquisition channels for the business advertising side. And to go fast, we're leveraging existing tools and contractors. And so I wrote an RFP, which is a request for pricing. And that's quite some work. And then the contractors or the SaaS platforms, they responded with an offer, and we jumped on a call, right, with the most promising ones. So if you think of that, that's a transaction that's about to happen or has happened, and there's efforts on my side, on the buyer side, right? I spent some time, but those costs aren't part of what the vendor thinks of CAC. They're not computed, they're not considered in there, right? And so that's very interesting. And that's, again, something marketers don't consider. Why is that important? Because the transaction costs are the sum of buyer costs plus seller costs. The more self-serve we go, right, the more the buyer needs to do those efforts, sign up on the platforms, maybe read the docs. Again, like all those costs that he or she is supporting. Separately, the seller, which is all of you folks here and myself, and I'm selling tools, right, has to do all of what they know, the acquisition channels, the paid, the SEO, the content, and all of that, right? But the groundbreaking thought, the gist of the idea is the transaction cost is almost always the same. It doesn't change. You can move the split, right? But you're not changing the size of the pizza here or the amount on the tab. You're just splitting it differently between the buyer and the seller. And the balance, that split, is generally motion dependent. Okay, so if, going back, if you are in the self-serve, a PLG motion, most of the costs are supported by the buyer, right? And that's because the vendor isn't doing anything really to sell, right? The customers are acquiring themselves. They are selling to themselves. They are deciding on their own whether this is the right product for them or not, right? Why does that happen? Why do we let people do that? Why do we let potential buyers decide for themselves if this is the right tool? Because the ACV is low. There's not enough margin on the vendor side to do it any other way. Okay, keep that in mind. Keep in mind the fact that there's not enough margin, because I'm going to come back to it. On the sales-led side, so the other extreme, the vendor supports all of the costs. Why do you do that as a vendor? Well, because there's a high ACV, right? It's a worthwhile investment because you can increase the conversion rate, you can acquire more people, and it's a competitive motion, right? If the competitors are going to spend money and you can do it too, well, of course you have to. Otherwise, you're going to lose those sales. Okay, so keep in mind the forcing function that we have here, and the fact that the ACV defines what you can do because it defines the CAC. Now let's jump into the CAC to ACV spectrum. Okay, now that we've laid out how those costs are split, I want to discuss and share which channels are the best fit for each motion. I'm a big believer that the CAC defines the channels. I talk to founders all the time, and the one thing they don't realize when they are trying to hire a generalist or a specialist is that they need to find somebody who has the expertise of the specific ACV, specific segments. Because again, if you have a high CAC, you're going to be able to do things that you don't if you don't have a low CAC. So every strategy has their ACV to CAC split, the ACV to CAC pizza, right? In B2B, which is where I live, I've seen business plans with audiences where to acquire that customer, that audience, a good CAC is in the low 5 figures. And, if you go up the funnel, you do the reverse, you reverse engineer the math, you end up maybe with a lead at the top of the funnel, the prospect, that is already worth thousands of dollars per lead, right? And you know what? It's really hard to spend $1,000 per lead and do it well. By the way, that's one of my interview questions when I'm helping companies interview VPs or CMOs in marketing growth. I ask them, show me how you're going to spend $100, how you're going to spend $1,000, how you're going to spend $10,000. Most people fail at that question. They don't know how to spend a large amount on a specific customer and do it well. Okay. So if you have this range of ACVs and corresponding CACs, maybe you have at the low end, you have $1,000, annual subscription product, and you're ready to pay $100. And maybe at the high end, you have, $100,000 product and $10,000 CAC. Well, obviously, you end up with those very typical segments, each matching what the buyer can afford to pay for the tool, and thus what you, the vendor, can pay to acquire them. And that becomes, as I said, a forcing function into the channels. Each of those channels exists in this segment because they're a way for you to preserve a healthy CAC to ACV balance. Okay, virality, SEO, affiliates is cheap. And so it's a good channel for micro and startup. Conversely, ABM, partnerships, enterprise, they're expensive. You can only do that if you're focusing on mid-market and enterprise segments. Now, can you mix things up? Can you acquire mid-market or enterprise accounts with virality or SEO? I mean, sure, that's the best outcome because you're creating into this green arrow, super high margins, right? You have a low CAC and very high ACV. That's very rare. Okay. Be careful about the exact opposite outcome, the red arrow here, which would be acquiring micro and startup companies with a very expensive channel. And unfortunately, I see a lot more red arrows in the companies I advise than the green ones, right? Do not do that. Okay. And here, I really want everyone to understand what it means by matching the ACV with the CAC, and that being a forcing function into your channel options. And this also explains why HubSpot and other similar companies are very successful. They were able to do the green arrow. They have the low CAC, high ACV. Okay. But also, this is why companies start with a PLG motion. They focus on the product and then expand to include higher level segments. For what it's worth, do chime into the chat if you have some contrarian thoughts, but I've thought about it. I do not have a single example of a company that started with an enterprise product and successfully went down market. Successfully was able to go from enterprise down to PLG. I can't come up with a single example. So what if you have a range of segments? Well, as I said, like often like companies start, on the lower end, and they start, wanting to acquire, grab that extra customer base, those more juicy customers, right? The big mistake is that they think, hey, virality works for us, SEO works for us, we're just going to do that and acquire the higher level segments. That doesn't work, except for like very rare cases, like I said, HubSpot. The rule of thumb is new segment, new channel. You want to acquire a larger, higher, let's say, segment, you're going to have to open new channels that are going to be more expensive. And you got to forecast that and plan it in your business. Okay. If you expand, it also means you need to run multiple channels, multiple motions at once. And that becomes an identification and a routing problem, which you could think of like two separate things. One, how do you identify quickly which customers are a good fit for which audience? Is this visitor, this prospect, a micro SMB, or are they a mid-market enterprise? Because you want to maximize the value capture and minimize the costs. As I said, if you're spending the enterprise level costs on an SMB audience, you're losing money. Second, how do you route them to the right motion to improve the experience and increase the conversion? So if an enterprise customer comes in and is getting an SMB experience, that's not good. You underinvested. So you really want to route them as fast as possible. And each of those motions have different premises, right? If you think of PLG, it's how to get a lot of people at zero cost. In PLS, can you get those medium spenders at some affordable cost? And in sales-led, really, it's about the experience. So the experience tracks the spend. Each of them comes with different CACs and different motions, right? For example, in sales-led, the product almost disappears from the sales motion. If you jump into an enterprise sales call, you're going to see, I see it often, there's no demo. You don't go into the product. It's just slides and a discussion. Okay? So you go from like high product to no product. And each of those motions has different failure modes. For example, in PLG, if you can't create network effects, or if you have a small TAM, you fail. It's just not going to work. You're not going to get to that 100 million in revenue that's going to drive the $1 billion valuation. In PLS, if you have a poor product experience, no one's going to want a demo. And in sales-led, if the lead quality is low, or if you have a small ACV, again, you can't drive the revenue. The TAM is too small. So how do you combine those approaches? And ideally, skip the buying process. So what I mean by that is that there is an ideal outcome for both parties in the transaction. That ideal outcome is that the buyer has such loyalty, such conviction that this is the right tool, the right platform. They skip all of the usual, due diligence steps. Example, I was talking with a colleague of mine. He said, "Oh, I love this product. I love Linear so much compared to Asana that every time I have a new job, I just bring in Linear. I'm not doing any research. That's interesting. He loves the tool. He will sign up immediately. The transaction costs are almost nil. He is no longer doing any efforts. Neither is linear. That acquisition inherently has become free. So in this case, loyalty drives free acquisition. Okay, so how do we mitigate the risks, all of the failure modes that we talked about? Well, let's go about PLG first, right? The goal is to acquire buyers at a low cost. And so here, we're going to focus the efforts on low CAC experiments. And that means doing experiments in the product, right? If you split the costs in three, between targeting, the channel costs, and the activation costs, PLG means your growth team, your growth experiments, your framework is in the product because you want to drive the virality, you want to drive the network effects, okay? The users will come for free. The key to success is experiments in the product. There is almost no cost to the channel, but there is cost to building it. In sales-led, you want to capture the value by improving the experience. It's really about value capture here. And so here, the goal is to minimize the CAC by mitigating bad demos. The most expensive thing you can do is having your sales team expending the time, the budget, the cost on people who are not a fit. By consequence of that, the conclusion is the experiments go on the audience. When you think of like APM, it means all the work of the growth team goes on finding the right leads to have some amount of automation, but mostly humans engage. The experiments are top of funnel. You define the audience. You tell the users they are a good fit for you. It's exactly the opposite. Whereas in PLG, they will decide for themselves if this is the right product. In this case, you're telling them you need this product. Okay, that's the sales outreach logic. Okay, and obviously in PLS, you need to do the balance, right? You need to do some good targeting on a fairly large audience, but there's still a sales process to capture the value. And so the challenge here in PLS is that you must experiment across the entire funnel. Okay, you need to have a growth team that is capable of doing top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel experimentations. That is a large team. And that is a failure mode that I see in companies where they think, hey, we're just going to add PLS, and they don't staff the team. And so they don't have a team that's capable of doing experiments across all the funnel stages. Cool. Last part. How do we optimize this cat pizza? Okay, first, things to be cautious about. Okay, if you have multiple motions, one of the biggest risks is letting people pick which motion is right for them. I'll give you an example. Most companies that have a SaaS product, multiple motions, you can see it on the homepage. They have talk to us, sign up now, some form of that, demo and like try for free. Same thing. That means they're not deciding where people should go. Users are deciding whether they want to go the demo route or whether they want to go the sign up. That is a failure mode. I hate those buttons. Do not do that. Okay, you got to decide where the people should go. Okay, because once they start on a motion, whichever it is, it's going to be super hard to pull them off. I'll give you an example. People go down the demo route. It's not a fit for them. What are you going to do? Kick them out and say, hey, sorry, now you're not a fit. Go try the product on your own. It's a terrible experience. Of course, you got to go follow through. Now you're expanding the costs. The opposite is also true. I call it the blank slate product problem. I worked at Drift, Segment, tools where you need to install the JavaScript on the homepage for it to work. What do you think an enterprise company is going to do? Do you think they're going to sign up and put the JavaScript on their site? No way. They got to go through legal and security. They have this blank page problem, and they can't experience the product. And so we learned that to succeed, we had to prevent them, stop them from going to the product. Okay. Number two, the more you wait to engage, the less likely they'll convert. The aha moment that we call has an inverse curve, which is after they sign up, the reality is always worse than what marketing told them. The more you wait, the harder it is for them to engage and try to close them. So, as I said earlier, the how you win here is quick identification of where they should go. And second, routing. Those are two things. Identify them, put them in the right segment, on the right track, route them. Okay, so the key pillars to automate your multi-motion hybrid approach is you map the entire addressable market and you split it into segments. And for each segment, you're going to define what's the right CAC for the expected ACV that I have, and what are the channels that I can use for that CAC. Second, you're going to build a lead score, and you're going to build a lead score that can decide very quickly, based on third-party data, based on the usage, based on where they landed on the site, based on the channel they came through, what's the right motion for them. And third, you're going to remove those two buttons that you have on the homepage, and you're going to decide for them where they go. Okay, you can have a single flow on their side and multiple flows on your side. They're just not going to see it. Okay, you, last but not least, need to focus where you do the experiments. Okay, so you can win. Let me give you a quick example. If you want to try it for yourself, go to the Ramp homepage, or, friends of mine, the Gong homepage, gong.io. And you try to sign up with an email address of a small company and a random email address of a large company, something like Shopify or whatever you want. Okay, you know, Mercury, whatever you want to call it. Stripe could work. Okay, and you experience the difference in between those flows. Okay, what you can see here is a disqualification flow. In this case, I signed up for Ramp with a small business. And Ramp is saying like, hey, do you have $75,000 on your bank account? Do you have all those things, right? Do you think Ramp shows that when somebody from a large company signs up? Absolutely not. Why? Because if you sign up with the Shopify or SpaceX, they identify the domain, they match the domain, and they automatically say, hey, this is a great customer. Let's show the Calendly link. Let's use our lead scoring to route them to a better experience than a multi-step sign-up flow where we're asking them a lot of questions. We don't care about those questions. We don't need to ask them anything. It's Shopify. Like, it's the financial person at Shopify. Like, we just want to jump on the call. So you remove the friction. Opposite, if you don't know who it is, you want to add friction. Okay? So you got to route your experiments into your lead scoring. Okay? People arrive on your homepage, and you will route them across the segments. Okay? And those experiments will create a better experience for your customers, improve your conversion rate, lower your CAC across the stages. Okay, so before we go into Q&A, a few takeaways. As I said, you have multiple ACV segments. You want to serve multiple segments, which is very likely. Then you need to consider multiple motions. Second, if you have those segments, right, you need to align them with the right metric for each motion. A different CAC for different segments, a different CAC for each motion. Okay, you do not have a CAC. You have a CAC per group of customers. Okay, and you have a CAC per motion. Third, you focus the experiments in order to optimize the margin, reduce the CAC, and maximize the experience. Last but not least, early identification and routing are the key to success here. Cool, that's it. With that, I think we can let everyone breathe for a second. I'll take a sip of water and we can go into Q&A. Cool. As I'm preparing for Q&A, what I'd love to do is, if the people are still there, and I would love them to be, I'm going to call them out and ask them to unmute. And if they want, if you feel comfortable, come on camera to ask your question and maybe clarify. That's ideal, can create the most engagement. and I'm very comfortable with that. So I think we have Abby, who asked if I can explain again why going down market doesn't work. Abby, are you still with us?
Yeah, thank you so much. I feel like you kind of covered it as you went on, but maybe you can summarize if you don't mind.
Sure. What I see often is that some successful companies have an enterprise product, complicated product that is successful with a complicated enterprise sales motion. If they want to go down market, which means go to PLG, it's not just the marketing motion that they need to create. It's not just or even the true like product-led sales. It's the product that needs to get simpler. They need to create viral loops. They need to create network effects. They need to create a cheaper product to serve where people can close themselves. And that's what I almost never see happen. I have never seen an enterprise company successfully strip out parts of the product so that customers, users can get to the aha moments without the CSM team, without the sales team, without any of the costs associated with the enterprise sales motion.
Quick follow-up question, if you don't mind. So you said to simplify the product, but then to also create the network effects. Can you give an example of sort of how you would do that by also simplifying it?
Yeah, well, let's take an example of something that I'm close to in the fintech world. With Ramp, the bill pay product has natural network effects because if you want to get paid through the Ramp bill pay product, you need to sign up for Ramp. And so the more people pay and get paid, the more it creates like people who need to get invited. That's a typical network effect. Now, for example, right now, you can't do that on Ramp unless you also sign up for a credit card. The credit card means a credit card application. That's complex. And so what you would need to do is strip out, like cut the product in half and separate those two things, right? That's typically what you would do. It's very difficult. It's very difficult because you have legacy in the code and all things are tied together. And so you want to do it. You would say, hey, but on the opposite side, let's imagine a small company that just focuses on bill pay. They just start with this bill pay product, right? They have no legacy. It's very easy for them to build that and serve customers with minimal effort.
Thank you. That was really helpful.
Yeah, cool, sure. Cool. The next most upvoted, we're going for most upvoted here. The next most upvoted is Alan. Alan, are you still with us here?
Yes, I am.
Cool. Hey, Alan.
Hi. Nice to meet you. I'm from Monday.com, leading the PLS and SLG product marketing and customer lifecycle efforts. My question is regarding the advice that you gave about having one CTA that will reduce the friction for the customers, the users, and avoiding two call to actions. And we, as a well-known PLG company that wants to do the transition to SLG, are struggling with this advice because on one hand, we have the PLG is generating a lot of our ARR, and it's kind of the PLG trap, right? And we want to do the transition to the SLG, but not giving up on the PLG motion because it's still performed well. And I wonder, why you said that we should have only one CTA, like contact sales or contact us, while a lot of our customers wants to do the sign up.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a bit it can be a bit danger to remove one of them. It's a high risk action.
I understand. I understand and I respect that feeling. Absolutely. Now, the reason why I say that is when you have both CTAs, you're letting the customer choose his story, right? He can choose the motion he's going to be on. The problem with that is you end up with a lot of customers on the wrong side, in the wrong motion. As I said, you end up with some small businesses which are PLG fits into the demo flow, and you need to reject them. And the rejection experience is never a good one, never a good one. And you end up with some enterprise or sales-led customers into the product, and it's going to be very hard to upsell them. Once somebody starts, on the $39 plan, you're going to say, oh, but you need all this other stuff. And they're like, no, it's working for me. It's good. I'm good here. Right. And so it's very hard to capture the value and minimize the costs if the customer decides what's good for them. Okay. Now, you have a successful PLG motion, though. So how do you mitigate the risks? My advice is not to decide who should go in PLG, because that's very hard to do. However, the reverse is easy. Deciding who should go in enterprise or mid-market is easier, because that can be done through IP identification or with like fingerprinting. You can say, hey, this is an IP of a large company, or this user came from a channel that is typically for large enterprise. Keywords that are relevant from enterprise. Those people should probably not be able to choose a PLG motion. Because, for example, imagine you have like Monday versus competitor, a very expensive keyword, very expensive keyword. And then that enterprise customer on an expensive keyword goes down the PLG route. Now you've lost money. And so that's easy to route them to the right experience.
So in other words, you're suggesting to use Clearbit or ZoomInfo tools to identify those customers and send them and control the narrative of sending them to SLG.
Yes, absolutely.
Now it makes sense, because to give up, like to choose one of them, it will be a high risk action for a big company.
I agree. And you can do that with people coming to your website. You can also do that on, as I said, with the paid motion, with landing pages. You can do that with outbound motions by, deciding who should get the outbound email. So on many, many different channels, you can be the judge of who goes where.
Right. Thanks for
the
clarification.
Awesome. I see people in the chats, and it's hard for me to monitor the chat. There's a lot going on. So if you can move the questions from the chat to the Q&A, it's just easier for me. Thank you, Eleanor, for catching that too. We have Bradley. Brad, are you online with us?
I am. Hi.
Hey, Brad.
Thanks for that presentation. That was lovely. Yeah, I'm Brad. I'm from Prolific, or prolific.com if you want to visit. We help the world's researchers do their best research across academia, corporate, and frontier AI. I thought it was really interesting, and we are in, we've got our challenges are very relevant to what you had to say. So again, thanks. My question is for many that are listening and many that will probably watch on demand. The budgets for using something like Clearbit, 6 Sense, etc., a lot of the ABM platforms may not be there. So I guess the question is, how do you see companies that are either starting up fresh, young, or face budgetary constraints, find viable solutions to your suggestion?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a lot of those tools, and I love those tools, and transparency moments, I'm a stockholder in many of those platforms. All right, so I'm biased. I want to say that. I'm incentivized for most of them to succeed. Most of those tools are useful for companies that have a spectrum of motions, of segments, especially on the mid-market and up. The let's say the coverage of IP to domain or cookie to domain, or whatever the technology you're using, is correlated with company size. It has a really good coverage at the mid-market and audiences and up, and a very bad coverage, very low specificity for the startup and SMB. So if you're focusing on startups, SMB, or individuals, don't try that. It is not going to work. Just letting you know, it's just not going to work. You can get false positives all over the place. The first thing. Second thing, there are cheaper options out there, and there's a lot. There's retention.com has a really good one, which comes with some legal risk, which you want to consider. but very interesting. There are some other people who do it across in Europe. There's a lot of folks who have different options, different price ranges. The price range more or less aligns with coverage. What I suggest you do is you figure out one that is cheap enough that you can test it and see if the added information, if you can leverage it and create additional revenue through the routing. If you can, it should pay for itself. And then you can start adding more of those vendors because the identification enables you to extract the ACV. If you identify, you route people, but you don't extract the additional ACV, then something's broken in that flow. And so you need to fix that first. So that's what I suggest. Last but not least, as I said earlier, the identification is not the only way. You can do that through outbound. You know who you're emailing, and through paid keywords. You know what kind of audiences come on that keyword. And so those are also ways for you to test. If I route the audience of that channel to this motion, are we capable of like doing a better job? Yes and no. And until the answer is not yes, it's not worth investing in like advanced tools. That's my opinion.
That's great. Thank you very much for that.
Sure, Brad. You got it. Cool. Next up, and I don't know, stop me when we have to go. I'm just going to go down the list. Okay, cool. I can't get to them all, but the next one is Gaurav. I don't know if Gaurav is still with us here. If not, wait. Hey, Gaurav, there you are.
Yeah, I really like the diagrams of the way you explain things, almost like Lego blocks, and that was very clear. I know Brian talks about the ACV CAC death zone in terms of essentially both of it being in the middle and that not leading to sustainable businesses. Have you come across businesses like these? So we have examples, and what is your view on that? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, most businesses fail because they can't extract enough revenue compared to the amount they're spending. So the charts I give you is an example. Let me give you here the actual data extracted from a recent survey. In B2B, most companies spend about $1 of fully loaded CAC. Fully loaded means marketing spend plus sales spend, okay, for $1 of annualized revenue, which means a 12 months payback time. That is the average. The top quartile, the top 25% of companies in terms of growth rate performance spend about 50 to 60 cents. Okay, that gives you the range here, which means a lot of companies are spending more than they bring. And the issue is, talking of ACV here, there's one thing I did not bring up, which is LTV. LTV is churn. Are people staying or not? I didn't bring it up because like that adds extra complexity on like retention rates and whatnot, and we already have enough to cover. But consider this thing here. Look at Ramp. Ramp has a forecasted retention of years because companies don't change their credit card that often. And so that enables them to spend whatever they want. They don't care, right? Because when your retention is years and your ACV per year is in the tens of thousands, the sky's the limit, my man. The sky's the limit. Most companies are not Ramp. That's why Ramp is so successful. And that's why everyone is building things like Brex or Ramp, right? Most SaaS, the retention, and I've worked for SaaS where the retention was months. That's the death zone. Because in SMB, there's no way you are, so the death zone is very specific. You either have PLG, and then acquisition is free. If you have free acquisition, do whatever you want. Retention is not a problem. The first month is like you're in the money. If you're in PLS or sales-led, imagine you're in sales-led and retention is like less than 6 months, well, you're dead, right? And that's why sales-led comes with like 1-year contract engagements to pay back the acquisition. That's just the natural order of things. The death zone is you're in the middle, you have like you're expending like this 1 year and the product that sells. You don't have 1-year engagement, you have month to month. People churn, you're dead. Game over. That's it. That was like bleak. So, but yeah, that's the reality. That's the reality. Cool. Awesome. Eleanor, we had time or one more?
Yeah, I think we can do one more. I think Gianluca was actually at 4.
Cool. Jen, you have a question? What's Jen? Gianluca.
Hey, hello, everybody. Yeah, can
Hey,
you hear me?
Gianluca.
Hey, nice to meet you. Well, was really great actually to attend the webinar. Really, really interesting. So I work with checking.com, and actually we do automate the whole check-in process for hotels, tourist apartment. We do actually follow both strategy, PLG and PLS. And I was super interested on what you mentioned about like the you cannot have like 2 call to action in the website, and that's actually what we have, no? Like we literally have like a button called register that where basically you click on it and you create directly an account. But we also have a button in the home page next to the one called contact sales. So it's basically a form, no, that they fill in, integrated with our CRM, and yeah, definitely even a small business can fill in that form, and then we redirect them, no, like saying, hey, if you need help, reach out to support, not to a sales team, no. So super interesting what you mentioned. My doubt here is actually, okay, which will be then the best call to action tag, no, for to have like a single button there. What will be, no? Because I'm literally wondering how I merge both things.
The button is dynamic. Your button is generally geared towards low value, so try the product. But when you have confidence, this is a PLS or SLG, like sales-led opportunity, the button dynamically changes to Let's Talk or some version of Let's Talk. You change the experience. That's the whole thing. That can be done on the homepage with like some advanced tools like Mutiny or whatnot, or it can be done with different landing pages and splitting and routing people to the right experience. But yes, the experience changes. It's not one button where you have like this catch-all sentence that works for both.
Okay, got it. So basically, you will make like few questions to the person or company that jump into the company to qualify it and make them going through a button or not.
You can, but I would strongly recommend you routing the traffic to the specific experience landing page or button version based on your prediction of what kind of customer they are.
Yeah,
that's really the and we can wrap up on this. That's really the modern marketing. Like the modern aggressive marketing is a lot of technology and a lot of forecasting to decide what's the best experience for your customers in order to maximize value capture and minimize costs. You are deciding what's best for them, which obviously happens to be what's best for you. That's the modern marketing. We're no longer passive and giving all the choices in the menu to our customers. Okay. And just to wrap this up, I got 2 kids. The 2 buttons that you have, and most people have, are just like if when my kid comes back from home, I would say, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to play or do you want to do homework? What do you pick? All right. What do you think my kid's going to pick? That's exactly the same thing. You don't want to give like options like that. Okay. You don't, that's not going to work. Okay. So you decide what's best and you implement what's necessary to be able to do that. That's it. That's the gist of my talk today.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, let's wrap this up. Thank you very much, Reforge, for organizing this talk, this event. If you have questions, you want to follow up, there's my contact information here. Again, you can reach out to us at HyperGrowth Partners for some advisory engagement directly through your founders. This is recorded. You can find it on Reforge. The rest of the content on Reforge is just amazing, great community. So see you there.
Thank you, Guillaume, and thank you all for joining. We'll send the recording in the next 24 to 48 hours. Thank you all.